Thelma Stuckey III would be born a year after the infamous riot of 1967, which saw over 1,000 buildings destroyed and $132 million in damages, which is about $1 billion in today's money. The riot would cause then Michigan Governor George W. Romney to send in the National Guard to restore order.
At the request of Mayor Kavanaugh, we've made state police and National Guardsmen available to assist in dealing with what is a case of lawlessness and hoodlumism, and to protect the persons and property of people in the areas involved.
The Detroit riots would become so infamous in history that it would be depicted in the 2017 feature film Detroit, which told the story of an incident that occurred during the riots at the Algiers Motel that left 3 dead and 9 assaulted and abused by members of the Detroit Police Department, Michigan State Police, and National Guard. He would be born just 2 weeks before the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King led to the subsequent riot in 1968 that rocked the city of Detroit. You see, after the riots of 1967 and 68, Black Power organizations were criminalized in the eyes of local and federal government.
The difficulties of covering major urban problems in cities as large as Detroit were dramatically illustrated last March when we covered a shooting at an inner city church. One policeman was killed and another seriously wounded. News 4 was on the scene with exclusive sound coverage within minutes of the first call on the police radio, "Officer in trouble." It began when a large group of black separatists, members of the Republic of New Africa, met in a church to plot their future plans. At about the same time, a 2-man scout car was cruising nearby, and the officers spotted about 10 youths in army fatigues standing on the corner near the church, some carrying rifles. The officers called police headquarters, saying that they would investigate. Moments later, their scout car was riddled with bullets and crashed across the street from the church. One officer was killed in that attack, his partner seriously wounded. Other officers rushed to the scene, responding to the same police call that prompted our camera crews. Police shot their way into the church, where they believed the gunman had taken refuge. Before the bullets stopped flying, 4 civilians had been wounded. Later, 135 persons were taken to police headquarters for questioning. News 4 sound cameras exclusively followed the action through the night, both at police headquarters and at Detroit General Hospital, where we talked to 2 of those who were...
On the bright side, though, the Detroit Lions had their best season in 7 years, finishing second in the NFL Central Division. Plus, Motown was still churning out hits out of Hitsville, USA, going on to have one of their most successful years. And probably most relative to who T-Stucky would become, Kingpin Eddie Jackson and his partner Courtney Brown would rise to prominence in the heroin trade in 1969. This would start what many might call the first Motown Mafia era, which continued until 1975. Detroit in the 70s would also experience white flight, making Detroit become a majority black city, with the white population declining more than 425,000 and the black population increasing from 44% to 63%. 1970s Detroit would also see the inception of the Stress Unit, which stood for Stop the Robberies, Enjoy Safe Streets in 1971. The controversial unit was said to have defended white businesses in racially transitional neighborhoods against alleged black perpetrators with deadly force until it was disbanded in 1973. Hitting even closer to home for T-Stucky, in 1977, just 2 years after the Eddie Jackson organization had sort of fizzled out, YBI, or Young Boys Incorporated, would set up their first heroin distribution spot on Puritan and Prairie, just 3 blocks away from where T-Stucky would grow up, on Puritan and Stopel. By the 1980s, as T-Stucky entered his adolescent and teenage years, auto industry closures and massive layoffs continued to cause economic and urban decay in Detroit. Mix that desperation with a fledgling drug market and the murder culture perpetuated by groups like the Best Friends Gang, and you have the era in which T-Stucky will come of age. Little about his early life or when he jumped off the porch is documented, but one could assume that Stuck would likely become active in the streets in or around the mid-80s, because by 1988 he would be serving time for second-degree murder.